Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
Welcome. The following excerpts are from an August 13th report published in the New York Daily News. A Bronx cop who was friends with an officer who recently committed suicide shot himself to death Tuesday, authorities said. Johnny Rios, 35, left a note before shooting himself in the head inside his Yonkers home about 3:30 a.m., sources said. His girlfriend was in the home when the 7-year veteran died. He is the 8th NYPD cop to take his own life this year. 4 officers killed themselves in June, including Rios' pal, Kevin Preiss, who shot himself to death in his Long Island home. Rios and Preiss worked together in the 50 Precinct and were close, sources said. NYPD Chief of Department Terrence Monahan discussed Rios' death during an interview on Brian Lair's WNYC radio show. Currently, we have 8 this year. That is a very large number, Monahan said. We want to let our cops know that it's okay to ask for help. It's really devastating to see that it continues, including last night. What's going to drive a person to take their own life is an individual event, stress in the job, stresses in your personal life, and is compounded by the fact that you have a gun on your hip, he said. On August 14, the day before this episode was recorded, a 9th NYPD officer died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound in Queens, New York. In this edition of the G-Man Interviews, W. Craig Hartley, Jr. joins me to discuss some of the programs his agency has implemented in an effort to help officers across the country who may be experiencing some level of emotional or mental distress. Mr. Hartley joined the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, Inc., also known as CALEA, in June of 2008 and was appointed Executive Director in January of 2014. He began his career with the Greensboro, North Carolina Police Department in 1989 and served in a number of positions within the agency before becoming an Assistant Chief of Police. During his tenure with Greensboro, he worked in the functional areas of patrol operations, tactical operations, accreditation, internal affairs, personnel, training, budget and planning, information and technology, and served as the Chief of Staff. Before joining CALEA, he also worked for the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services, an agency within the executive branch of state government assigned to the Secretary of Public Safety. While there, he led the department's Policy, Planning, and Research Division and coordinated legislative affairs and public information. He is a graduate of Appalachian State University, the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice/political science and a Master of Public Affairs. He has received specialized police management and leadership training from the Southern Police Institute and the Center for Creative Leadership, and he is a graduate of the Federal Bureau of Investigation National Academy. Thank you for joining me, Director Hartley.
I'm glad to be here.
For the benefit of those who may not be aware of your agency or its objective, could you provide an overview?
CALEA has been involved in law enforcement programming and public safety programming now for over 40 years. And we're very proud to provide services, and we try to ensure that we do the very best we can to promote good public safety services and good leadership within those organizations.
You inform me that CALEA has created programs to try and help officers determine if they're experiencing emotional or mental distress. Before you discuss the programs, could you tell me if there was something specific, be it statistical data or an incident, that made CALEA officials say, we need to address this, and we need to address it now?
Well, I think more broadly, CALEA and the commissioners that make up the commission itself really understand the importance of developing comprehensive standards to support public safety agencies. And although we don't have a standard specific to suicide prevention, we do have a number of standards that address the support of police officers and police personnel throughout the work life and their work histories. And we're very aware of issues that impact organizations that are providing public safety services. And in fact, we have an emerging issues committee, if you will, that specifically work to pay attention to those issues that are emerging and can impact public safety agencies now and in the future.
Throughout the decades, police officers have always dealt with some level of anxiety and stress that come with the job. But it's only within the last couple of years that they started taking their lives in record numbers. Is there anything definitive that you or CALEA can point to as the cause for the increasing number of suicides?
Well, I don't know if I personally can speak to anything that specifically causes those issues to increase. I think in general, police are under tremendous public scrutiny, and they're there to provide a public service at the demand of the public, and they deserve tremendous support in that role. Their jobs require them to work late shifts, be away from their families, miss holidays, see some of the things that are very difficult in life on a daily basis. They have to learn to deal with that, if you will, in a way that balances their personal lives and their professional lives and their ability to provide services. And as you know, sometimes those things can be completely overwhelming for individuals. And as that happens and those things begin to emerge, and they see things on television and other types of media outlets, it certainly increases the stress that they feel. So can I point to one specific thing? Not really, but I do think there are some societal pressures that certainly make the job more difficult maybe now than it ever has been.
Those are extremely valid points. However, there are police officers out there, unfortunately, that have been convicted of wrongdoing. Would it be fair to say those situations also place a certain amount of pressure and stress on police officers simply because they're often viewed by the public as part of a collective?
I think police officers have to work under the understanding that they have constitutional responsibilities to the public for those that they deal in both positive and maybe adversarial roles. And they have to be prepared to deal with that and apply the law in a way that supports the public and the mission and purpose and values of their organizations. They have to operate within the constructs of the law, and the prosecution of officers currently on issues that may arise may or may not affect the suicide rates, but certainly officers understand that they have a responsibility to operate within the constructs of the law.
What are some of the ways in which your agency is trying to prevent these tragedies?
Well, we spoke earlier about the existence of standards and how we promulgate standards and a best practices model on a comprehensive approach. And so we work within organizations through things like the establishments of police early intervention systems and also things like employee assistance programs. And as an example, our early intervention systems are structured such that it helps organizations identify individuals that may be under pressure. And maybe it manifests itself in different ways, such as the use of leave, or citizen complaints, or uses of force, or any number of measurable attributes that impact police personnel in their delivery of services. And those systems are structured to watch for changes associated with officers over the time that they are employed. They're also structured to allow for supervisory intervention when those things occur, and really develop to show officers where there are risks, not necessarily something specifically wrong in a disciplinary fashion, but really to look at things that may be potential risks for employees. And then once those things are identified, provide some type of review process and intervention strategies to help those that may be struggling with either personal issues that affect their professional life or professional issues that affect their professional life, all really in the name of ensuring that they continue to provide the very best services possible while at the same time supporting the public that they serve.
When creating the programs, did CALEA do so autonomously, or did it draw from models that were already being used by federal, state, or local law enforcement agencies?
Well, the interesting thing about CALEA accreditation standards is that we don't necessarily tell agencies how to develop their programs at the local levels, but we do have certain requirements of the programming itself. And so the beauty of that, if you will, is each organization can look at what attributes are important for them to measure. And like I gave you a few attributes earlier, But sometimes things may be different in a rural environment where they're providing police services as compared to a very metropolitan environment where police services are provided. But when CALEA develops the standards themselves, we always look at existing research, existing best practices that are out there. We may lean on organizations like the Police Executive Research Forum. We may lean on organizations like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or we may lean on organizations like the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, all to provide experiential learning from their research or their involvement in the industry to ensure that our standards are comprehensive, they are appropriate, and they are enduring.
And how is the effectiveness of the program measured?
Well, accreditation is applied by organizations enrolling with a CALEA. They begin to work through the standards that exist in a self-assessment process, meaning that they take each standard and they develop policies and practices and procedures to ensure that they're in compliance with the standards. Then they raise their hands and say that we're ready to be assessed by CALEA professional assessors, and we make that happen for them. We do it through remote reviews, and then we do it by site-based reviews. The successfulness of the programs are really measured against the standard's intent, so that we look at what the standard was supposed to accomplish with the organization, how the organization structured their model to help address those issues that are there, and then we discuss issues with individuals who are impacted by the standards themselves to see if the outcomes are meeting the objectives. I can tell you a good example of that occurs in the recruitment and selection process, where organizations often have recruitment plans that aspire to have certain percentages of representation from the community. And so organizations develop these plans, and then we look at how they have accomplished those objectives over a protracted period of time. I always tell people that accreditation is not a magic bullet. It doesn't fix things overnight, but over a protracted period, it impacts the culture of the organization, and it encourages the organization's leadership and personnel to use data and outcomes to really constantly measure its success and constantly look for new strategies to improve the delivery of services and at the same time improve the support of its personnel.
And the same evaluation process is used when determining the effectiveness of programs that have been set up to help officers in distress, right?
That's true. The number of suicides in each individual organization is certainly not, and thank goodness it's certainly not to the level that you have on other types of operations within the organization. And so sometimes you have to really go back and look at the event itself and see what signs and signals or symptoms that we might have missed before it occurred. Thankfully, organizations are not faced with a great sample of those particular events, but there's things like the National Police Foundation has put together to look at sentinel events inside organizations themselves and help support organizations to look for what occurred along the way that we could have changed in order to help that person or help make the event associated with the delivery of police services better or save a life of a police officer. So again, I think the important piece is that we really always evaluate what happened in that event that might help us improve our service delivery and protection of our personnel in the future.
Has anyone from CALEA reached out to the New York City Police Department to offer assistance?
No, that has not occurred. We do provide services to the New York City Training Academy, but we're not engaged in services with the New York City Police Department. But we were certainly always available to organizations that would have an interest in engaging in services with CALEA.
Have you or any CALEA official seen data suggesting the number of suicides is A, far worse than people realize, or B, being underreported?
Gary, I'm not real learned about that particular issue and haven't done a lot of personal research on that. And as you know, this issue is starting to emerge from media attention like you have provided, and the events really getting public recognition at this point. The numbers up or down at the current time, I just don't know enough about that to speak knowledgeably.
Fair enough. I appreciate your candor. And finally, I have a request.
Okay.
I'd like you to step away from your role as CALEA's executive director and I'd like you to suit up one more time, as you did while you were with the Greensboro Police Department, and talk to officers here in New York and abroad who may be thinking about killing themselves.
Well, I think the most important thing within any police or public safety organization is there's good internal support mechanisms, Gary. And the reason I say that is because in any industry you work in, you need to have really a best friend at work that you can reach out to and share information with and trust. Sometimes that's a mentor, sometimes it's just a friend, sometimes it's somebody that works in the same work group or work function that you work in, because it's really about sharing information, sharing concerns, and feeling a lot like you have support from a 360-degree perspective. I also would encourage people that work in the industry to really strive to work on a balanced life and have home life that's supportive as well. Certainly that's not always controllable by the agency, and people have individual issues that they certainly have to face. But I think a comprehensive approach to good professional services is really about a balanced life. And again, making sure that you're able to have resources to reach out to in distress and know that you're not the only person that deals with those issues and that others have and have dealt with them successfully. Police provide one of the most honorable services that you could possibly provide in a community, and almost all of them do it for reasons beyond just the compensation they receive. They all are public servants. They all want to see the community be successful, and they all want to make sure that at the end of the day, the community is safe and they're meeting their duties and responsibilities and meeting their oaths of office. And sometimes there's great pressure with that. And I think it's important for the community to know, too, that those officers, although taking on a very honorable role, they're still human beings that have stressors on them and really need the support of the community as well. So I encourage organizations to have strong employee assistance programs. I encourage organizations to have effective early intervention programs. And I encourage communities to provide support for police personnel because they are providing a service that is beyond what others are willing to provide sometimes, Gary.
How would you define a balanced life?
I think sometimes people in any industry, not just the police industry, can be overwhelmed or absorbed by the requirements of their work. And for me, a balanced life is always about having a physically fit body and having activities outside and that cause you to use your physicality, if you will. But it's also about having good family connections and having people that you connect with outside of the work life that can share concerns and worries and Thanksgivings and happiness and those types of things, because it gives you perspective to know that you're not just a police officer, and police officers are the only ones that have stressors. Teachers have stressors, people that work as engineers, medical professionals, nurses, doctors, lawyers. Everybody has stressors in their lives. And connecting with individuals outside the police circle helps you to understand that it's not specifically unique to police, although there are some differences in the services that are provided by public safety officials as compared to others.
I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, Director Hartley. Thank you.
I'm glad to do it, and Gary, anytime you need anything, feel free to call us or anybody on my staff.
Thank you, sir. I thank you for joining me as well, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to share your thoughts on this episode, feel free to do so at fromthegman@gmail.com. That's FROMTHEGMAN@gmail.com. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.